Tulsi Gabbard is here. This used to be one of her districts that she would, frequently visit when she was a congresswoman. Tulsi Gabbard is on reserve duty right now, so we can't talk at all about politics. I don't want to get her into trouble, so we're just going to talk about the situation because I don't know what's happening. And I'm hearing all kinds of things. I don't know if those are true or not. I'm just seeing things that I've never seen as a broadcaster before, so I don't know how to answer them. Tulsi, welcome.
Hey, and to all of your listeners for all of their support. It really means so much to our community there on Maui that is continuing now 9 days after this crisis began, really struggling and suffering and is having a hard time looking to see what that road towards rebuilding looks like. But your support means the world.
Thank you, Tulsi. So we're hearing things like homeowners are not allowed to go back. We are 9 days after this, and we still have 1,000 people missing. I don't know of a natural disaster in America that has been in such a tight area where this many days after we are still missing 1,000 people. We've heard stories that these numbers are being quashed intentionally, that the National Guard has closed this whole area off. I've never seen that before. What's happening?
These are all a lot of questions that folks on the ground have and are very appropriate. It's unfortunate there has been so little communication coming through official channels at a time where the mayor needs to be out there on social media or on TV every single day giving extensive and open update briefs to be as completely transparent as possible so that people know what's going on. There's been a vacuum of communication, and as you know, in that vacuum, a lot of questions and a lot of fears and concerns arise. So let's just kind of start with the first, some of the first questions that you asked there. This is an unprecedented crisis in the last 100 years in our country. Right now, we have first responders out there on the island of Maui who are from across the country who are helping to support the foremost mission, which remains recovery. This wildfire started with a small brush fire that quickly grew out of control because of these 100-mile-an-hour winds. It's suspected that downed electric lines contributed to its spread. But really, the word that I have heard best describe this wildfire is it was like a blowtorch. It was an out-of-control wildfire that swept horizontally and very quickly, in less than an hour, across the historic town of Lahaina, taking down and turning into ash everything in its path. People have explained how these flames sometimes hopped and skipped, which is why you saw boats that were, a little bit far off of land get completely destroyed. The questions about how is it possible that there are still over 1,000 people missing? How is it possible that at last count, they have only identified the remains? Actually, they haven't identified the who, but they have recovered the remains of 111 people. When you think about the quickness of this fire and the destruction, just imagine you have a 3 or 4 story boutique hotel there in Lahaina. This fire comes in and levels that hotel down to the ground. We don't know how many people were in their hotel rooms. From what I'm told, they're not able to recover records of who might have been in that hotel. And then you take that example and just spread that across the entire town, and homes and shops. Front Street in Lahaina had shops lining both sides of the streets. You had restaurants, you have tourists, you have residents, you have service workers. You have a lot of people in a very small area who very sadly perished in a very short period of time. Now, there's a Google spreadsheet that's going around where family members have listed the names of their loved ones as missing. But this remains recovery mission is so slow because it requires cadaver dogs to go and find these remains. Unfortunately, the destruction is so great that the human eye is not enough in many of these cases to identify these remains. And so this process is going to go on, and I expect the mayor or the governor will be making an announcement with a time estimate soon. But they've got there are not very many cadaver dogs in the United States of America, trained cadaver dogs. I've been told that there are 20 on the ground there. They can work for 20 minutes, then they need 20 minutes rest. So they're rotating these cadaver dogs so that they can go through and do their work. But they are not moving from one area to the next until all the remains in that specific area have been identified by these dogs, and then allowing the humans to come in and do that work. It's a very slow process. And that's not, just to finish that, that's not even beginning the process of the identification of DNA and figuring out, matching these remains to people, correct.
So this would put to rest another question that I have had. I've never seen anything where people can't return in to go through their own rubble. The insurance adjusters are not allowed to go in, and they've blocked everything so nobody can go back in. That would answer the question on why that's happening.
There's two main reasons.
They don't want anything touched, too many people. Go ahead.
Correct. There's two main reasons for that. Is they need to preserve the area for the remains recovery mission to go on undisturbed, number one. Number two, as you can imagine, along with all of the different buildings and houses, there were, two gas stations completely leveled to the ground. Those gas stations had underground fuel tanks. The level of toxicity in this area is very, very serious. And so that is another factor that local officials are rightly taking into account of coming up with a plan on both for the near term, we've got to make sure that anybody going in there at the point where they are able to open it up to families to be able to go back to their homes, which needs to happen as soon as possible, if nothing else but for closure. They've got to make sure they've got the protective respirators and gear to make sure that they are not they're not causing a medical crisis in the process. The removal of the toxic, this is not just going to be about clearing debris in this case. I've been told in order to remove the toxic elements that have been caused by this fire, they're going to have to dig down, 5 to 10 feet to be able to remove all of that and then figure out where does it go, how do they transport it, and everything else that follows there.
All right, so I've only got a couple of minutes. I have a couple more questions left. One of them is about the guy who has just resigned, and I actually feel bad for him because I think he probably thought he was doing the right thing by not turning on the air siren, because what I read, he said, if I would have turned it on, people would have gone to the top of the mountain because that's what they're trained to do, and they would have gone right into the fire. Do you believe that? Or I mean, I don't want to throw this guy underneath the bus.
Well, you know what? I call bullshit on that, and hearing that response really pissed me off. It really pissed me off because of a couple of reasons. He's the Department of Emergency Management Director. Why did it take him, 8 days for him to show up in front of the media and answer questions? He should have been the first guy out there when this thing happened, answering questions, fielding concerns. It took him 8 days to show up at that podium and show his face to the public, number one. Number two, we have a highly sophisticated alarm system across the state of Hawaii because of our proximity to hurricanes and tsunamis and all sorts of different natural disasters. We know that if it's a tsunami, we get days warning. If there's an earthquake in Japan, they say, hey, tsunami alert, a tsunami may be headed your way. That didn't happen, and we're smart enough to know that. These alarm systems are used in the case of any form of natural disaster. A tsunami alert could have been ruled out immediately because they don't just show up out of nowhere. We will get that notice. That alarm sounding could have possibly prevented loss of life. So I don't buy that. I don't buy that reasoning at all.
Tell me about the water guy who seems to have some love affair with water being more sacred than people in some of his former statements that didn't act to turn on the water. And it looks now like it was because of water equity. Is that true?
This is a much longer question, unfortunately, than you have time for. Maui has a long history of different entities fighting over who owns the water on Maui. And unfortunately, for decades now, the people have been suffering as a result. So I'm still learning the details of, they say they made the request to use the water for the fire trucks. The state didn't approve it quickly enough. I could tell you what I would do in that position. I would have just said, use the water. I'll ask for permission later. But, it's a really complex problem that ultimately can be summed up to corporations buying water rights to irrigate plantation fields and local people suffering from drought and lack of water as a result. Wow. That's the historical context that we're operating under.
This is just a mess, and I wish you and your family all the luck in the world, and our love and prayers and our hard-earned money are going out to everybody who's affected. I don't know how this ends up, but it's really bad so far. Good things will grow from it. I'd love to keep in touch with you and your listeners, and just ask you to stand with us for the long haul, even though there has been, and we will continue to learn about incompetency and failures and perhaps negligence on the part of the government, and who knows, the electric company, who knows who else is really culpable for things that should have been done but didn't. But ultimately, I just ask that your hearts and prayers stay with the people of Maui, who are who need our support in every way as this recovery and rebuild goes on. I want you to know, at least with my audience, I'm pretty sure their hearts are with the people of Maui. They're responding as usual. They're responding in a big way, and we've already sent a gigantic plane load of supplies out. We're on the ground. I think we were one of the first people on the ground, and we'll be the last to leave. So, Tulsi, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Glenn. God bless. If you would like to donate, please do at mercury1.org. That's mercury1.org. This is going to be a long-running story, and I think it's going to prove out a lot of the things that we all have been saying about government and business collusion and public-private partnerships. They're not good.